In the Fox science fiction series Fringe, a division of the FBI investigates paranormal events and interacts with the inhabitants of a parallel universe. This alternate reality, discovered by characters Walter Bishop and William Bell, is strikingly similar to our own universe, yet exhibits several key differences. After the death of Walter's son Peter in 1985, Walter crosses over to the other side and kidnaps his son's doppelganger. He brings the boy back to our side in order to cure him of his genetic disease. By doing so, Walter tears a hole in the fabric of reality, unleashing cataclysms on both universes. In this documentary series, I try to examine the historical origins of many of the differences featured in the show. I've interviewed 3 people with vast historical knowledge who can help me answer some of the questions regarding Fringe's alternate universe. First, we must establish a basic timeline of events around which to orient these theories. The earliest divergence seems to occur around the time of Andrew Jackson's presidency, as the members of the alternate Fringe team do not recognize Jackson's name or his likeness.
Who the hell is Jackson?
Going forward, other historical alterations include John F. Kennedy never being assassinated, which results in a space program that is far more advanced. We can also tell that Richard Nixon and Barack Obama were still elected president, and we see signs of the 9/11 attacks and other familiar events. My first question is, what's more likely, that Jackson was never president in this timeline, or that he's just not remembered as a historical figure?
It could very well be, I think in my opinion, that Jackson was never president.
I don't think anybody can forget Andrew Jackson, whether he'd been president or not. I think he was locked into American history because of his service in war.
He kind of was deprived of the presidency by the so-called corrupt bargain. And then in the victory in the 1828 election, I think was more because he was able to build a coalition outside of the South. Had he not been able to do that, he would have only got the votes of the South and the West that didn't have as many electoral votes, and John Quincy Adams most likely would have been reelected.
Well, he vowed to do so many things while he was in office. Like, of course, he said he killed the bank, and he basically took over the Western U.S., or he started it.
Having become president and being such a character, not to mention all the duels he fought in, he's definitely unforgettable. Unforgettable for the Trail of Tears, which obviously was a bad part of our history. Unforgettable for his quip to the Supreme Court, which apparently he said to John Marshall, he's made his decision, now let him enforce it, concerning the Cherokee Nation, of course, and the Trail of Tears, which started the Trail of Tears.
So it seems that Andrew Jackson is too unforgettable to have been elected president in this timeline without being remembered. This opens up a number of possibilities, including, but not limited to, the renewal of the charter of the Second Bank of the United States. So my next question is, what would our country look like today if the bank had survived?
I don't see any scenario where the Second Bank of the United States is allowed to fail.
It had already been deemed constitutional by John Marshall in the Supreme Court, McCulloch versus Maryland, right? Where he said, developed the implied powers doctrine of Constitution Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, that if any powers Congress assumes is related to the powers 1 through 17, then it's an implied power. And then the second part of the decision, the power to tax, the power to destroy. The bank could have survived. The Federal Reserve that we have today is another form of a national bank. Basically serves the same functions, right?
Basically, I think that the Bank of the United States would have ended up functioning very much like the Bank of England, where the government played a direct role in the functioning. I think that if the Bank of the United States continued to exist into our modern day times, it would effectively be like what the Federal Reserve does, a regulatory agency that can loan money but doesn't necessarily stand for all bank policy. I think that some other entity might have come along in the meantime, as the Federal Reserve played no role in stopping the crash of the stock market or the onset of the Depression.
I don't think it looked a whole lot different whether the Second National Bank survived as an institution, survived Jackson, and then, when Wilson becomes president, instead of, he doesn't need to beg for a Federal Reserve because there's a bank that exists, a national bank that exists. At the end of the day, the National Bank and the Federal Reserve, they're both creditors, right? Difference being that the national bank was had private investments being made into it, the Federal Reserve does not.
In order for this to work, there would need to be another president like John Quincy Adams that wins the 1832 election, of which the bank's renewal was the central issue. One figure that comes to mind is Senator Henry Clay, a Whig whose campaign platform included renewing the charter. If Mr. Stevenson's estimation of a no-fail scenario is correct, then the U.S. might not see another Democrat elected until James K. Polk, whose presidency is at the center of another oddity, which we'll explore in the next episode.